Welcome to Gray Overload. I'm Anthony, and let's talk about Intel's Big Little design. When Intel first talked about a hybrid design, I was skeptical on how they were kind of approaching it, considering their track record in recent history. However, knowing that ARM has done Big Little designs and there's been other CPUs out there designed with it, I know it's fairly feasible that they could have well designed it and had this going forward to have better efficiency or better production on what people are trying to accomplish in certain designs. And while you may not like it in a big server chip that's doing a lot of powerful solving of problems, or constantly running, or even a high-end desktop that you're constantly gaming on, or even just even more performant building code on, like stuff like that where you need more instruction sets, the big little design works in quite a few different areas. I mean, even with my Surface, that would be something where I don't do a lot of horsepower work, or where a big little design could be much beneficial. So with this, it seems like Intel may be starting to get their foot on the right track here, and maybe their new CEO has helped them do that, or they have finally straightened themselves out enough to actually show that they can maybe be competent in this release of their big little design. Now, I do think Windows is going to have some trouble with this. I know there's been a thing called the Intel Thread Director, and that's supposed to help out. So maybe the Intel engineers are actually going through and helping out Microsoft quite a bit with this. I think really that's the only way to iron it out. And maybe Microsoft has learned something with their ARM experience as well. And if they have, this could be a benefit for Windows 11. I think that this is only going to be in Windows 11 as much as Microsoft should just have had it in Windows 10 too. I think they had to make some changes to put this in Windows 11 for that. So with the big little design, right? Basically, what that is having some less powerful cores, we'll call them. So they're not as power hungry. They're not as powerful. They don't have a full instruction set as your big cores, which are going to be able to be more performant. Going to do all the heavy lifting, but you also use way more power. So one thing you could do with this, especially depending on how an application is written, and well, not only written but compiled, is applications that are less intensive, they can run on the little cores. So effectively, you can shut down the big cores, meaning that they're not using power, especially in a mobile scenario. This all of a sudden extends the device for much longer. Now, Intel doesn't just have to compete with AMD; they also have to compete with Intel or with MacBook and ARM and basically Apple. And Apple just said goodbye to Intel. I'm sure Intel did not like that. So there is a huge thing where I think now Intel, not only are they trying to compete with AMD, but they have something to prove to Apple. I do not think that AMD, being the competitor it is really that scary to Intel. I think Intel and AMD, they've even had a collaboration where they are on pretty good terms overall. Now, I think the more incentivizing way to compete was Apple saying no to Intel, and Intel really got kicked in the pants there. That's just my perspective on it. But I do think that this big little design can be a huge leap forward for Intel in basically keeping a stronghold on the mobile market, as well as maybe putting in some new ideas and revolutionizing how we kind of think of computers and how computers kind of can schedule and run, really advancing the scheduler in Windows, and of course it'll also be in Linux. But I think the Linux scheduler to me is far superior than Windows 1. I use Windows a lot, but I also use Linux. I do think that Linux has a far better scheduler. So with that, I think that this is kind of where Intel is going through and saying, hey, here's some scenarios we can improve upon if Windows can get this right. And I think eventually Windows will get it right. I don't think it'll be right away. If Windows gets it right on the first time, I will be shocked. um, Microsoft has a lot of problems right now, and they need to work on their quality a lot. So I do not think that they'll get it done the first time, but I think with Intel's help, and let's say Intel even makes it a, somewhat where hardware is going to take over and do this, I think there's a huge benefit here. Now, I do think at some point AMD is going to have to go down this big little route as well. There is, I've listened to Moore's Law is Dead. I've listened to um, Jim from Adore TV. They have some really good information on this. But my perspective on this is that at some point, as you're competing with ARM in that low power segment, right? Intel does not want to be eaten from both ends, right? You have AMD that is competing at your high end and has done really well the last couple of years, and you have ARM competing at your low end. The problem, I think, in all this is yes, you make a lot of money on server CPUs, and yes, Intel can still make good server CPUs and still sells a lot. However, that can be manipulated. But your low end market, your volume market is your mobile. And when Microsoft said to ARM, let's start making CPUs, um, Intel knew that they had to improve on their performance. Now, for the longest time, either it was semiconductor manufacturing side of things where they couldn't get a new node out, or design or whatever else it was, combination thereof, bad management. They were not getting better mobile products out. AMD kind of has done some mobile products to help them in that mobile range, but I believe Intel still wants that low range. I believe Intel still wants to be the king of the hill, and they want to make sure that that low end mobile market is theirs. I think that they are, let's say the ARM deal goes through with Nvidia, I think that they are actually kind of fretting that because Nvidia has an opportunity with their GPU side to have them a big little architecture with a GPU that they could basically roll out and have something. If I was Nvidia, I'd be working with Microsoft, getting it in, a Surface type device that could then just be used. It would be I think, a very prominent little device that you could probably have some competent gaming on. So Intel, has this GPU side, is getting big little, wants to be able to meet ARM in the playing field to be able to go ahead and do this. I think that big little could be very successful. As much as it scales up, I think over time it could scale up, right? Even if you were to eventually put, let's say, a gaming CPU, you could reduce power usage by using little cores for, let's say, your web browsing and stuff like that. And then when you hop into the game, use those more powerful cores, or you were doing development, etc. Now, even in the HADT, right, as you do MCM chips, you can put different size chips or different purpose chips on it. So let's say you have, for AMD, right, they have a 32 core HEDT, 64 core, right, HEDT one, and or even their server side stuff, right, 64 cores, 128 threads. What happens then when as you shrink it, you maybe go up to, let's say, 96 cores, but then you throw in a little quad core, small, low power chip. So when the server boots up, it boots up on that, and then when you get the workloads on it, it spins up the big cores, right? Saving power, having lower power during the time, and I could see this to have a little low power across a stack. And however Intel or AMD call it, or whatever it is, I think AMD or Intel is calling it, 16 core, 24 threads is what the rumor is. So you have 8 big cores with that are threaded, and then you have 8 small cores that are not. Which, okay, I don't know if there's a better way to kind of name those, and I don't think until you flood the market with a whole bunch of them and we kind of get it all worked out, we'll really know how consumers really interpret it. But I think that this is a fun little idea that Intel had, and their execution on it, I think, will prove to be beneficial in the long run. And I'm excited to see how this actually turns out, because with technology, right, you need to evolve and you need to change things up, meet the market where it's at. And when, let's say, you get a little bit behind like Intel was, it offers you an opportunity to really make I would say this is kind of a radical change to x86, but it's already been done in ARM. But make that change so then it becomes more the mainstream, because then people can see how beneficial it is. I get it that there's people out there that may not think it's beneficial, and I have my questions about it before, because I've seen how Intel kind of has uh, said some things and stood and then let them go by for years and years and years, and not really hit on what they've said is going to happen and what they want to happen. But listening to some hot chip stuff, reading some other things, listening to some of these talents, I think that Intel has an opportunity here where they might have actually cleaned up some of their mess that they've had the past couple of years and made this product to be one that is going to be worthwhile. So I'm excited to see how Intel comes out swinging with this. Big, little, and new CPU architectures just always interest me, right? They're really, I think, an opportunity. When you have a new CPU architecture, especially some major changes, really to kind of twist and make a better computer, better um, hardware for the user, which is me in this case. I love to be able to see it in like a Surface type device. There's even that computer called the framework that you can then piece together. That's really, really interesting to me. I'd love to get my hands on one of those. Actually, to replace my Surface with something like that, I think is very cool. I'm of the position, let's get as much life out of the device as possible, and then it either breaks, and if it's repairable, that even makes it better, because then I can repair it, get even more life out of it, or have the upgrade where then somebody else could take those old parts, use them to their benefit, etc. So let me know what your thoughts are on the Intel's Big Little architecture. Only time will tell to see how it really competes with AMD and ARM and everything else out there. But I think this is an opportunity for Intel to really showcase Big Little and what it has, and hopefully work through the growing pains with Microsoft to get this actually working in Windows. Yeah, we'll see how long that takes. But I'm excited about it. Let me know what your comments are. Let me know what your questions and comments are in the comments below. And until next time, God bless, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.